Before I begin reading this passage, I'd like to set some context. In Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, Jesus is in the middle of teaching about his return and the final judgment. He has just described the Son of Man coming in glory and gathering all nations before him, separating people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. The sheep are placed in his right hand, and the goats at his left. What we are about to hear is how any person can connect with God through kindness and generosity, even if they feel he is out of reach. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." Book of Ruth opens in a time of hardship and uncertainty. Yet, what we see in these first verses is remarkable loyalty and faithfulness. What I connect with most is Ruth's commitment to stay with Naomi, even when she had every reason to leave. It's a powerful example of human love towards another person. Love is more than words or even actions. It is an otherworldly spiritual force that encourages kindness, sympathy, and compassion. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and two sons. The name of the man was Emlich, yeah, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion, I think. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Emlich, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her two sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Oprah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived, there was about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her two daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security each of you in your house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Oprah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. So Naomi said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you, to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her.
Good morning. It is good to be back at Niles Discovery. I thank Pastor Jeff for the opportunity and the leadership team to be back here. To moderator Barbara, thank you for the chance to be back here among you for worship, for reflection, and for our time together. We have a long relationship with Niles Discovery, as well as the communities that represent and gather here in the confluence of both the disciples and the United Church of Christ. And we are grateful for those relationships and opportunity. They take shape of certainly the connections more directly through somebody like Pastor Jeff, who is a PSR alum, Reverend Pepper, and many others who have been shaped by the educational opportunities at PSR and have helped to shape also our ministry together. And so for that, I am deeply, deeply grateful. And I bring greetings on behalf of our Board of Trustees. Actually, a couple of our board members are with us today as well, Mark Jacobson and Danielle Hawthorne. So thank you both for being with us here. You'll have an opportunity afterwards as well to join us in the reception. Our Board of Trustees is committed to the work and shaping of our institution on behalf of the church and of the world at such a critical time. I bring greetings also on behalf of our faculty, our dean, Susan Abraham, as well as our staff. And I'm delighted to have also with us Michelle Estrelado, who is our executive director for development. So Michelle, if you can wave back there. Again, an opportunity to connect with you all here. So thanks to the three of them for representing those groups. And most importantly, I want to bring greetings on behalf of our students who are shown here having a great party. This was for prom last year. You're welcome to come to prom. We are probably the only seminary that has a prom, but it is great fun, and that's going to be April 24th on campus at 7 p.m., and everyone is welcome. Our students represent a broad spectrum of traditions, of communities, and just like our worship life here, includes a hybrid experience of those who are on campus and take classes on site, and those who do so remotely from across the country and around the world. As Pastor Jeff has said, my name is David Vásquez-Levy. I serve as president at PSR. I've been there now for 11 years, which in seminary president time is becoming about dinosaur time. But PSR's been around for a while, so it doesn't look too bad. We will mark this year 160th anniversary of our Sweet 16, so we are delighted. There will be a number of events that we will mark this anniversary, including the 100th anniversary of our campus in Berkeley, as well as the 25th anniversary this year of our Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion. Specifically, I want to invite you in September 25th and 26th for our Earl Lectures that will focus on faith beyond exclusion. This is an annual conference that actually is the longest running lecture series in California, started in 1901, and this year will mark the 125th anniversary of that series as well. We are building on that legacy today to respond to a world that, in the words of the World Economic Forum, is presenting us with challenges that are both wholly new and eerily familiar. So in our work that we do with this legacy as an institution, we draw on the traditions of our communities of faith and on the technologies of our time to try to find ways, as our predecessors in previous generations have, to rise to the occasion. Please join me in a word of prayer as we reflect on the text for today. May the words of my mouth and the meditations in our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our God and our Redeemer. Amen. In the time when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. This is the way that the text from Ruth, that was so beautifully read, begins. You know, it's easy to just look at that as a throwaway sentence and get on to the story and not pay attention to that beginning. But because I'm here from a seminary, I want to invite you to do a little closer reading of the text, which is what we do in seminary. In the days of the judges. See, that simple phrase is the exact same phrase with which the book of Judges ends. The book of Judges comes right before the book of Ruth in the order of the canon in the Christian tradition. And it ends by saying that in the time of the judges, everyone did what was right in their own sight. So the book begins by telling us that in a time of political crisis, where everyone does what they think, when there is a polarization in the society, is where the story takes place. And then there is a famine in the land. The story begins in Bethlehem. Another nice word for you from seminary, Bethlehem means the house of bread. There is a famine in the house of bread. The place where we should expect to be able to be fed, nurtured, and strengthened. The place that is supposed to be a light on the hill becomes instead the place of famine. So the story begins in a political crisis and an environmental crisis, and it leads to the displacement of people. We live in a time similarly marked by political turmoil and the threats of environmental crisis that shape storms and fires and floods almost on a daily basis. These twin forces of political collapse and environmental crisis often lead to the displacement of people. See, it was so bad in Bethlehem that they went to Moab. You would never do that. See, Moab was the place you don't go to. See, it got so bad in LA that they went to Tijuana. See, it got so bad in Ukraine that they went to Moldova. See, it got so bad in Jerusalem that they went to Gaza. This is what the story is telling us. That those who are displaced are often displaced out of despair and move because they have no other choice. And so those who listen to the story, who would not have been listening to it necessarily in a church saying thanks be to God after the reading, they would have likely gathered around a fireplace to hear the story. And those awkward names would be important to name, those who lived and those who died, that we would know their names and remember them. They would gather around the fire and invite us to remember the stories that are core to who we are in moments of distress and despair, so that we may know a little better where we have been, so that we may figure out where we will go. Elie Wiesel, the writer of the book Night, uses a phrase at the beginning of his book where he tells the story of a rabbi that reminds us that God created humankind for the love of story. See, God loves stories. And stories are key and central for us to spend time telling stories. The stories of the things that have shaped our lives, of those moments when we have stood up in times of duress. And we need to hear those stories from one another increasingly so that we may know we've been here before, we can get through this together. In those stories, the names of Chilion and Mahlon, of Elimelech matter. See, they went to displace Moab, and the people who were around the fire would have known that you don't do that. And if you do, violence is likely to follow. And that is what happened to them. And so now the story leads to what is inevitable, that those who have already been displaced suffer yet again the loss of their loved ones in this place that is strange to them. We read the stories of immigrants every Sunday in church. Voices of the stories of those who are the least among us, that Jesus reminded us we might find him in them as well. So here's another seminary word for you, the word chiastic structure. So a chiastic structure is the nature of the Book of Ruth. See, a chiastic structure has the shape of an X, more or less what it looks like. It's a chi, which is a word or a letter in Greek that represents a reversal. The Book of Ruth is a book of reversals. It begins in famine and it ends in harvest. It's a book that begins acknowledging political distress and it ends in a new legacy of stability in the beginnings of King David's legacy. It begins in exclusion and it ends in inclusion. A chiastic structure is something like what begins gets repeated at the end and reversed. So, for example, don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things. Or perhaps more apropos to our moment, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The Book of Ruth uses this chiastic structure to turn things around, to encourage us both to name the reality of a moment of political and environmental crisis and displacement, but also to pay attention to where the pivot happens that allows the story to turn. And that pivot happens on a hilltop between Bethlehem and Moab as two women who do not have the right to determine their own futures make a covenant with one another. It is a place where a woman who is older, who no longer feels she has much to offer, but who believes that the best is all behind her and not ahead of her, and encourages these young women to go back to their families. One of them does, but the other one, Ruth, says, no, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God, my God. And where you die, I will die. It is on that covenant, on that commitment between two women, same gender people, making this commitment, the time of commitment that now we mostly hear at weddings. But it is not between a man and a woman. It is between two women whose authority to make a decision about their future, their assets, and their well-being is not allowed. This is more like the 1960s trying to get a credit card if you were a woman. You could not do it without a man. And yet these two women in that environment make the choice to covenant with one another. What is interesting about their covenant, however, is that it begins by saying, your people will be my people. See, Ruth does not say to her, in order for this to work out, my God is going to be your God. My people are going to be your people. She begins by saying that what matters most to Naomi will be what matters most to her. That kind of covenant creates a complete turnaround, a reimagination of what it means to be in commitment one to another. In an article about, it has to do mostly with fundraising, but this article talks about the reckoning our sector's narrators don't want to see coming. The author is trying to recognize this political moment we are living in, recognizing that it's not just a blip on the screen, but that something radically different is happening about how we narrate our self-understanding as a nation and as a people. And he invites us to listen closely to those covenants being made on the margins, in the small communities, in the bottom-up changes. Speaking to the young people who are trying to find different ways of creating community, of responding to challenges and to change by wearing sometimes frog outfits, or finding other ways to express their outrage, their hope, or to recreate connection to one another, he says, so they'll build something else. Forms of civic life that are smaller, slower, more place-rooted, and people-driven. They won't be polished, and they won't ask permission, but they'll do the work of stitching something back together, something the experts once told us we wouldn't need anymore, each other. In the story of Ruth is a story that tries to tell a counter-narrative to the dominant stories of the time. Tomorrow begins the celebration of Purim in the Jewish tradition. In the celebration of Purim, everybody dresses up in, costumes because this, and we read the story of Esther at Purim. It's another small book. Ruth and Esther are the two books in the Bible named after women. They're both very short. So your assignment today, because we're still in seminary class, is to read the rest of Ruth. See, once we're done with church this afternoon, you can read it. There's only 3 chapters left. You already heard most of the first one, so you can feel very righteous that you read an entire book of the Bible. And that's what will be done in Jewish communities in reading the book of Esther, starting tomorrow as part of Purim. Like Ruth, it is a counter-narrative to the writings of Ezra and Nehemiah. As the people were returning from exile, there were many who wanted to make Jerusalem great again by divorcing themselves from anybody who was foreigner, by creating the sense of purity that the well-being of the nation could only be found on its own isolation from everybody else. But the book of Esther and the book of Ruth tell a different narrative, a story that begins from the bottom up, not from those in power, like Ezra and Nehemiah, but from those with little power, who realize it is perhaps for this moment for which I have come into opportunities that I have to act. So these two women covenant to one another. It is their generosity, their trust, their commitment to one another that makes the pivot, that helps to change the story. This place here is a covenantal community. In this space here, both in this space and across the waves of online connections, you have made a covenant with one another. To stick it out sometimes when things are in disagreement with each other. To find ways to balance the budget together. To figure out your way through this moment and through your life in serving the neighborhood, in creating space for the own house, in finding ways together to covenant with one another that we may make a difference. In his article, Lewis goes on to say, this won't be a movement you can fund from a distance. It won't be legible to dashboards or pitch decks, but it'll show up in the refusal to let go, in the courage to begin again. The next civic life won't be scaled. It'll be stitched thread by thread, place by place, person by person. And if we want to be part of it, we'll have to stop managing from above and start showing up from below. Brothers and sisters, there is no larger nonprofit network in the United States than the Christian church. Whether it's the inner city or a small town, when the schools are gone, the bank is gone, the gas station's gone, there's still a church in just about every town in this nation. And there may only be 20 and 30 people showing up at these places. But I can tell you from experience that there are many nonprofits that could not possibly gather 20 to 30 committed people willing to covenant with the mission of that place. The book of Ruth and the example of Ruth and Naomi who commit one to another is an invitation for us to restitch together our communities right here with one another. And to find at moments when we feel we have no agency whatsoever, to find ways that we may act with one another so that your God may be my God, your people be my people. Now, we are living in an increasingly fragmented society. And one of the things that is putting a lot of pressure on our society, and that is expressing itself in polarization in the economy and polarization in our politics, is a reality about our demographic makeup. On this graph on the left is the United States demographic bell curve in 1880 for age. Most of the things we do, most of the way our society, our economy, our retirement plans, our healthcare are designed with that bell curve in mind, with a lot more people at the bottom and in the workforce, and a lot fewer people at the top of that demographic bell curve. That is no longer the reality of the United States. On the right is the graph of what we have become the most generationally diverse society in the world. If you take 20-year brackets of 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 and above, we are getting to the place where there's almost an equal number of people in each of those brackets. And so we are feeling that pressure in our political decisions about who cares and who matters and what we should do and how the solutions may look different to us depending on which part of those brackets we find ourselves in. So it is critically important that the top of that bracket, which holds most of the wealth in this nation, begin to think about the lower part of that bracket and say, your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. What matters to you will matter to me. What will do your well-being will be my well-being, rather than a sense that these are competing. And it's especially important because the bottom part of that bracket, at 20% in California, 75% of children 18 and under in the United States, in California, are children of color. 75% of children 18 and under in California are children of color. And the wealth in the top 20% is 14 times the wealth in the bottom 20% per family. So this covenantal community, and all the ones we are connected through with Pacific School of Religion, through the region here for the disciples and the conference for the United Church of Christ, each of us can stitch together anew a way to try to imagine, to try to work out how these communities might connect more intentionally to one another. If we begin to see our future shared together. At PSR, we have committed ourselves to making a shift from a primarily teaching institution to really see ourselves in the direction of the board as a learning network. And we want to learn with you. We have resources that we have developed through our faculty to help educate and train and learn together what this future might look like. But our invitation is that we might learn together. See, we are learning with about 60 different students who are doing doctoral of ministry programs. These are folks who are working in congregations trying to understand something that is working in their churches, or they're trying to figure out and to write and reflect on that in community. We have congregational renewal cohorts that are beginning to form all over the country, of small groups and congregations that are trying to work through a program of theological education together as leaders to try to reimagine what that congregational life might look like. And we have launched our Pacific School of Religion PSR Collective, which is a place that creates access to education to people. Last night, we started a course on telling stories of migrants with a filmmaker from Guatemala to try to capture those stories together. So my invitation is to think about the ways that we covenant with one another here and with others around us. And how do we strengthen the covenants between our communities and those who are around us, particularly those who are different from us? By the end of the book of Ruth, something very interesting happens. The women that at the beginning of the middle of the book, when Naomi returns to Bethlehem because she has heard that God has seen it to return life and well-being to Bethlehem, she goes back with Ruth, and Naomi go back. And at the beginning, they're very discouraged. But by the end of the book, the women in the town gather together and sing this to Naomi. Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a next of kin. And what they recognize says the following: because your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne you a child. So what's interesting is that in the book, we find the most surprising turnaround. It is the women. This woman in a society that is patriarchal. And these women are saying to Naomi, she's better to you than 7 sons. So support, strength, covenant comes from strange places. In the words of Marie Brown, with which I leave you, she invites us to think about the creativity of what comes next, of how we reimagine what it means to be church, neighborhood, community, and solutions to the challenges we face. And she invites us to think of this as pretty much science fiction. She says, I believe that all organizing is science fiction, that we are shaping the future we long for and have not yet experienced. May we covenant with one another to create and imagine that world together. Amen.